Safety on a construction job site doesn't happen by accident. Your employer is responsible for creating a hazard-free workplace so you don't get hurt while on the job. But keep in mind, your personal safety starts with you. You need to be aware of the potential hazards on the job site, you need to take action to avoid or eliminate them, and you need to report any hazards or unsafe conditions. Your work environment includes the physical location where you perform your assigned duties, as well as the surrounding conditions. Much of your work environment is controlled by your employer based on various OSHA regulations. After completing this training module, you'll be able to identify specific worksite arrangements that help maintain a safe work environment. Exposure to hazardous substances can cause diseases which may appear in the short term or over a longer period of time. In construction, there are 3 categories of health hazards that need to be recognized, evaluated, and controlled, which include chemical, physical, and biological hazards. Chemical hazards include gases, vapors, fumes, dusts, fibers, and mists. Some possible health effects from chemical hazards include asphyxiation, damage to body tissue and organs, silicosis, mesothelioma, and cancer. When 2 or more hazardous chemicals are present at the same time, the effect on your body can be greater than the effect of the substances by themselves. For example, the risk of developing lung cancer is greatly increased by exposures to both cigarette smoking and asbestos. Physical hazards common to the construction job site are temperature extremes, high noise levels, repetitive motion and working in awkward positions, and ionizing and non-ionizing radiation. The effects of physical hazards range from sunburn and frostbite to hearing loss and cancer. To protect yourself against physical hazards on the job site, wear the proper personal protective equipment, or PPE, to protect you from excessive noise and weather conditions, and use all equipment correctly and safely. Biological hazards you may be exposed to are fungi or mold, bloodborne pathogens if you or others become injured, bacteria, poisonous plants, and poisonous and infectious animals. Allergic reactions, hepatitis, HIV, infections, and poisoning may result from exposure to biological hazards. Your employer should provide you with protective measures controlling your exposure to health hazards. This can be accomplished by monitoring exposure limits, following good work practices, and performing medical surveillance after exposure occurs. You play an important role in keeping yourself and your co-workers safe from injury and illness. Be aware of the hazards present at your job site. Use the appropriate PPE and stay within the communicated exposure limits. If you're ever unsure, ask for help. OSHA's Hazard Communication Standard, often referred to as HAZCOM, requires your employer to inform you of the chemicals you may be exposed to, the hazards associated with each of them, and how to protect yourself from their potential dangers. As a part of the HAZCOM standard, your employer must create a list of all hazardous chemicals used at a job site, ensure there's an easily accessible safety data sheet, or SDS, for each chemical, ensure each chemical container is properly labeled, train workers on chemical hazards and how to use safety data sheets and labels, and develop a written HAZCOM program that explains how the HAZCOM requirements are met. While your employer has a lot of responsibility when it comes to the HAZCOM standard, it's important you do your part to stay safe too. For example, before working with any chemicals or other hazardous substances, remove all jewelry to avoid chemical burns. Read the label on chemical containers or review the SDS to understand the specific hazards of the chemical and any emergency procedures to follow. Wear any required PPE, which may include eye and face protection, respiratory protection, chemical-resistant gloves, coveralls or other clothing, and safety boots. If your job site has an emergency eye wash station or emergency shower, make sure you know where the nearest one is located. Keep all chemical containers closed and secured properly when not in use to prevent the accidental spill or release of harmful vapors. When you finish handling a chemical, wash your hands thoroughly and make sure your PPE is clean and properly stored. You should never eat, drink, or smoke near chemical application or storage, and know where to dispose of any unused or waste chemicals as directed by your employer. Chemical wastes should not be placed in the same container unless you know it is safe to do so. Be sure to know how your employer wants you to respond to any chemical spills or leaks. Safety signs and tags have been developed as a way to help prevent accidents on the job site. They warn you about potential hazards on the site so you can take appropriate precautions. You may encounter different types of accident prevention signs. These signs can indicate danger, caution, exit, safety instructions, directions, and traffic. These signs use specific color schemes to differentiate themselves from each other. For example, danger signs are red with a black border, and caution signs are yellow and black. In addition, you may see accident prevention tags, which are used as a temporary means of warning workers of an existing hazard, like defective tools or equipment. In order for safety signs and tags to be effective, you have to not only know what they mean, you have to do what they say. Remember, these signs are there for your safety. Working around and using equipment powered by electricity is necessary on any job site, but it can expose you to a greater risk of burns and internal injuries caused by misused or defective equipment. Such injuries can be caused by electrocution, explosions, fires, and arc blast. Shock and electrocution happen when you become part of an electrical circuit. Its effects on the body can range from a sharp tingle to immediate cardiac arrest. Burns may appear as small marks on your skin, but can result in severe internal injuries. Electrical burns are extremely serious and require immediate medical attention. Explosions can occur if electricity ignites explosive vapors in the air. The ignition can be triggered by something as simple as flipping a switch. Fires often result from defective or misused electrical equipment. With an extension cord, for example, loose screws that connect the cord to the plug may ignite a fire. Arc blast is an explosion that can disintegrate everything within a specific area, causing eardrums to rupture and propelling shrapnel with a force equal to a small hand grenade. Only a qualified person who is specially trained on how to avoid electrical hazards should work on or around exposed energized parts. Visually inspect all electrical equipment before each use. Only use approved electrical equipment and use all equipment according to the manufacturer's instructions. Wear specialized PPE like a Class E hard hat, safety goggles, gloves, and non-conductive footwear while working with or near exposed electrical equipment. And survey the area before starting any overhead work to ensure there are no overhead wires. There are a few things you should avoid doing to stay safe as well. Do not attempt to handle electrical equipment you haven't been trained on. Never try to repair electrical cords or equipment if you're not qualified to do so. Avoid contact with a fallen power line. Never assume it's safe to touch, even if it appears to be insulated. And do not touch an injured person who may still be in contact with an electrical source. Electrical safety is not something to take lightly. If you ever feel like something isn't right with a piece of electrical equipment, don't use it. Remove the equipment from service and report it to your foreman. Fire is one of the deadliest workplace hazards and one of the easiest to prevent. In order to keep yourself and those around you safe, it's critical you know the most common causes of fires on a construction site, know how to prevent them, and what to do if a fire breaks out. A fire could start from any number of potential sources of heat or ignition, including things like an electrical source, smoking, welding, or grinding. Fire is made possible by 4 components that are commonly referred to as the fire tetrahedron. The components represented by the tetrahedron are oxygen, heat or another ignition source, fuel, and a chemical chain reaction. The absence of any one of these elements will prevent a fire from starting or continuing to burn. One of the most important strategies for preventing fires is good housekeeping. There are a few key things you can do to control fire hazards. Regularly remove debris and trash using proper disposal methods. Arrange the job site and equipment so it doesn't obstruct exit routes or emergency equipment. Follow all guidelines for preventing and controlling combustible dust hazards. Perform all equipment maintenance in a well-ventilated area and clean up any fuel spills immediately. Report all chemical spills right away to ensure authorized employees can safely clean it up as soon as possible. Store all flammable liquids in a specially designed safety cabinet or storage room, and remove combustible materials such as cardboard, paper, or fabric from the area before you do any work that creates sparks or uses an open flame. If you discover a fire, evacuate the area immediately and alert others on your way out. Don't be tempted to fight the fire unless you're designated, trained, and equipped to do so. Always follow your employer's fire prevention and response procedures. Any work that involves burning, welding, using fire or spark-producing tools, or that produces a source of ignition is referred to as hot work. Because of the nature of the work being performed, there are a number of potential hazards associated with hot work, including fires and explosions, toxic fumes and gases, harmful radiation, electrical shock, noise, combustible dust, and falling objects. When possible, the object on which hot work is being performed should be moved to a designated fire-safe location. If that object cannot be moved, all movable objects in the surrounding area that can catch on fire must be taken to a safe place or protected in some way. If all the fire hazards cannot be protected, steps to confine the heat and sparks must be taken. If you see hot work being performed, stay alert to any hazards that may arise. If you're not an authorized hot work operator, fire watch, or permit authorizing individual for this job, stay away from the permit-required area during hot work operations. Whether you're a part of the hot work process or not, whenever you're near hot work operations, take care of yourself by wearing the appropriate PPE. And look out for others by staying alert for possible dangers and reporting them immediately. A permit-required confined space, also known as a permit space, is large enough for an employee to fully enter, has restricted means for entry or exit, is not designed for continuous occupancy, and has a hazardous atmosphere or other serious hazard. Before anyone can enter a permit space, the employer must prepare a written permit that outlines all the hazards and how to control them. There are 3 distinct roles that must be filled in order for entry operations to occur in a permit space. The authorized entrant enters a permit space to do the assigned work. The attendant is stationed outside a permit space to monitor the authorized entrant and start a rescue operation if needed. And the entry supervisor is responsible for determining if acceptable entry conditions are present, for authorizing entry and overseeing entry operations, and for terminating entry. Your employer will assign a competent person to identify all confined spaces that a worker may enter. To warn you of the existence and location of all permit spaces, your employer will post a sign that says, "Danger, do not enter," or by restricting access to the space with a lock or barrier. Permit spaces are incredibly dangerous places. Unless you're trained and authorized, never attempt to enter a permit space. Working around and in excavations is one of the most dangerous jobs in the construction industry. There are many hazards you can run into, but most can be placed into 3 categories: underground utilities, confined space hazards, and cave-ins. Most trenching and excavation injuries are caused by lack of a protective system, failure to inspect the trench and its protective systems, unsafe spoil pile placement, and unsafe access to or egress from the excavation. Before you start an excavation project, a competent person will take steps to ensure the site is safe for digging operations. Excavations can be deadly, but they don't have to be. When working in trenches, know your responsibilities in the excavation process. Ask if you are not clear on any instructions. Always wear the required PPE. Know your company's emergency response procedures. Be sure your competent person tested the air when necessary before entering qualifying excavations. Keep materials or equipment that might fall or roll into an excavation at least 2 feet from the edge. Wear a warning vest or other suitable clothing marked with or made of reflective or high visibility material when you are exposed to vehicle traffic, and use warning barricades or other means to alert equipment operators of the edge of an excavation. Those are just a few safety tips when working at excavation sites, but be sure to always follow your company's instructions to keep you and your coworkers safe. A work zone is an area of roadway where construction, maintenance, or utility work activities are being performed. Some work zone activities can include building or repairing a bridge, adding travel lanes to the roadway, laying asphalt, and replacing electric, gas, or water lines within the roadway. There are a number of hazards you may face when working within a designated work zone, including being struck by oncoming traffic or heavy equipment, inhaling asphalt fumes, being exposed to extreme heat or cold, and contacting underground electrical lines. When working near traffic or heavy equipment, wear the proper PPE, including a hard hat and high visibility apparel that meets ANSI's Performance Class 2 or 3 requirements. Work where drivers can see you and position yourself at a safe distance from traffic. Remember, drivers may not be able to see you in low light or when weather conditions affect visibility. Because distractions could prevent you from noticing potential dangers, move in and out of traffic spaces and heavy equipment areas quickly and safely. When existing signs, signals, and barricades do not provide enough protection for operations on roadways, then flaggers or other traffic controls must be provided. Keep yourself safe in a work zone by remaining alert to everything around you at all times. Construction work is often performed outdoors or in buildings under construction that do not have heating or air conditioning. Extreme temperatures, both hot and cold, are not only uncomfortable, they can be dangerous as well. When you're working in hot conditions, your body will perspire to keep cool. When that's not enough, serious heat illnesses can occur. Illnesses include heat rash, cramps, heat stress, heat exhaustion, and heat stroke. General symptoms of heat stress are irritability, fatigue, headache, substantial thirst, and heavy perspiration. Heat stress can progress to life-threatening heat stroke, which requires immediate medical attention. On the other hand, if you're exposed to cold and wet conditions, serious injuries can occur, such as hypothermia, frostbite, chilblains, and trench foot. General symptoms of cold stress are shivering, loss of concentration, and difficulty breathing. Hypothermia, where the body's core temperature drops below 95 degrees, is a life-threatening condition. Depending on the type of work you do, you may have to work in situations where the temperature is either extremely hot or extremely cold. In these situations, take steps to ensure you're adequately protected. Remember, to keep yourself safe when working in extreme heat, wear clothing made of breathable fabric. Drink plenty of non-caffeinated beverages to keep you hydrated, and take breaks in cool or shaded areas. To keep yourself safe when working in extreme cold, wear layers of clothing made of breathable fabric. Wear appropriate cold weather outerwear and footwear like hats, gloves, a heavy coat, and insulated boots. Do what you can to stay dry. Stay hydrated by drinking water and warm beverages, and take breaks in warm areas. Whenever you begin to feel the effects of working in extreme heat or cold, take a break. And if things don't start to improve after a few minutes, ask someone for help. You've learned a lot in this training program. Here are a few highlights from each of the topics. Follow safe guidelines that control your exposure to health hazards. Know how to safely use chemicals at your job site. Pay attention to safety signs and follow their instructions. Take special care when working with electrical equipment. Practice good housekeeping to prevent fires. Wear the appropriate PPE when performing hot work and keep a safe distance when you're not involved. Stay away from confined spaces unless you are trained and authorized to enter them. Understand your responsibilities in trenching and excavation work. Stay alert in work zones. And take breaks when working in extreme temperatures and make adjustments when you start to feel signs of stress. Every work environment has its own set of hazards. Work safely to prevent possible illnesses and injuries.